What is going on, everybody? It is your boy, the Average Leader, here with another video. Today, we are going to do 937 on Leetcode reorder data in log files. This is Amazon's number one asked question, most asked question. It's been asked 143 times by Amazon within the last 6 months and asked by Google a few times as well. So let's get into the problem. You have an array of logs. Each log is a spaced delimited string of words. Okay, space is the delimiter. I think that's important. For each log, the first word in each log is an alphanumeric identifier. Okay, so the first word in each log is an ID, an identifier. Cool. Then each word after the identifier will consist only of lowercase letters, or each word after the identifier will consist only of digits. So right after this identifier, I see only digit. Oh, only digits for everything. Okay, makes sense. And right after this identifier, I see only strings or lowercase letters. That makes sense. Okay. We will call these two varieties of logs letter logs and digit logs. It's guaranteed that each log has at least one word after its identifier. Okay, so letter logs have all letters, digit logs have all digits. That makes sense. Reorder the logs so that all the letter logs come before any digit log. Okay, so I see that this is an important criteria that I'm going to take note of. The letter logs are ordered lexicographically, ignoring identifier with the identifier used in case of ties. Okay, so this is also an important criteria. Letter logs are ordered alphabetically, and digit logs should be placed in the original order. So that's another important criteria. Okay, so this is an interesting problem. First things first, let's go into the iPad and make sure we understand what this problem is really asking us.
So this problem really just comes down to comparing logs using these three criteria that I have above. So what are the three criteria? Well, letter logs are always going to come before digit logs. And then letter logs are alphabetically ordered with the ID used if there's a tie. And finally, digit logs are put in their original order. So if we were given two logs and we're told the type of each log, digit log or letter log, how could we compare them so that we order them properly in our output? Well, we can compare them based off of the three criteria listed above. So for instance, if we were given a letter log and a digit log, how could we compare them so that we order them properly in our output? Well, we see that our first criteria here, right here, says the letter log needs to come before the digit log. So let's order it just like that in our output. So here, this is all going to be our input. On this side will be our output. Now, like I said, the letter log will come before the digit log. Okay, perfect. Now looking at the next example, we have a digit log coming before a letter log here. Now, how could we compare these two values, these two logs, so that it fits our criteria and will be properly represented in our output? Well, we see once again in our first criteria, the letter logs need to come right before the digit log. So we'd order it just like that, so that our letter log will be right before our digit log. Cool. Now let's look at the next example, where we have a digit log and another digit log. How could we compare these two values so that they are ordered properly in our output? Well, according to our criteria, do we have any letter logs? No, they're both digit logs, so we don't need to look at this, the first criteria, and the second criteria also. But now we're told in the third criteria, digit logs are put in their original order. So let's just put them in the order that they came in, where the green digit log will come before the pink digit log. Oh, my bad, forgot the S here. And finally, in our last example, we have two letter logs. We have a green letter log and a pink letter log. How can we compare them so that we order them properly in our output? Well, according to our criteria, our first criteria says letter logs need to come before digit logs. Well, luckily we have two letter logs, so we go to our second criteria. Letter logs are alphabetically ordered with the ID used if there's a tie. So we'll just have to keep that in mind, right? Let's put them in this order for now. But just keep in mind that they need to be ordered alphabetically. So I will make that distinction here in another color. Ordered alphabetically with ID used if they are the same. Cool. So let's look at some real examples. So I pulled these examples from the example that was given to us on Leetcode. So now, how could we order these examples so that they fit our criteria and so that they'll be outputted properly? Well, we're told that, from the instructions, we're told that we know the first word in each of the strings is the identifier or ID. So this is an ID, this is an ID, this is an ID. All these are the IDs, okay? But the word directly after the ID will tell us if we have a letter log or a digit log. And that makes sense because, like, look at what we have in this first example. The word directly after dig1 is 8, and the word directly after let1 is art. We know that 8 is a digit. We know that art is a string, so that's like a letter log. So now, similar to what we were doing up here, okay, how could we compare these two logs, this one and this one, so that we order them properly in our output? So because we know that this first one is a digit log and the second one is a letter log, we know that according to our criteria, letter logs come before digit logs. So let's just order them just like that. Let1 art can will come before dig181. Perfect. Let's look at the next example. We're given two logs where the first one is a letter log because this word is a string, not a number. And the second, the log right next to it is a digit log because this word right after the identifier is a number. So using our criteria, we know that the letter logs need to come before the digit logs. And since this is a letter log and this is a digit log, the letter log already comes before the digit log in this case. So let's just order them the way it came into us. So let1 art can will come right before dig81, just like it was presented to us. And then now in our next example, we have two letter logs, right? Now, how do we know they're both letter logs? Well, the word directly after the identifier are both, oh my bad, let me keep the colors consistent. The word directly after the identifier are both words, or strings, they're not numbers or digits. So in this case, we're given two letter logs. Now, according to our criteria, what does that say? Well, in the second criteria, we see that if letter logs are alphabetically ordered with the ID used if there's a tie. So let's see here. Now, look at this entire letter log. Art can. We see that the entire letter log are alphabetically the same. So that means there's a tie, right? Now, how can we compare these two logs with this criteria? Since there's a tie, we know that we need to use the ID to order them properly. So we are instead comparing letter 1 with AET1. Now we see that AET1 comes before let1, alphabetically. So let's just order them like that. AET1 art can will come before let1 art can. Okay, in our last example, we notice that we are given two digit logs. How do we know that we have two digit logs? Well, the number directly after the identifier, they're both digits. They're both, numbers. So what does that tell us? According to our criteria right here, digit logs are put in their original order. So let's just put them in their original order that they came in, where the green digit log will come right before the pink digit log. Now, what did we do this entire time? We were comparing logs based off of our three criteria, these three specifically. Now, what do we know we can make in Java to actually compare logs for us? Well, we can create a custom comparator that compares the logs using these three criteria. That's the key to this problem. Once we create our comparator, we can sort our array using our custom comparator to actually compare elements in the sorting process. And that is how we're going to solve this problem. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense. And yeah, let's get into the code.
So, like we were saying earlier, the two big steps that we want to do in this problem is to create our own custom comparator and then use it while we use our arrays.sort method. All right. So the sorting method will take in two parameters in this case. It will take in logs, which is our input, and then it's also going to take in our comparator implementation, or the name of our comparator that we call it. And it's just going to sort our logs based off of the implementation of the comparator. So since it does that in place, and since we're going to apply it onto logs, we'll just return logs after we're done. Okay, so let's talk about how we can actually create a custom, our own comparator. So that would look something like this. Comparator, and it's going to work on what exactly? Well, we're going to work on a string of logs. So it's safe to say that we would be comparing strings, all right? So we're going to compare it on strings, and we'll call it custom comp equals new comparator, and then in our comparator, we need one method. It's called compare. So we'll just make that public, and it outputs an int. So int compare, and it takes in two strings, right? Since we're comparing strings, it takes in two strings, and we can call it whatever, but in our case, I'm just going to call it log1 and log2. Okay, perfect. Now, before we go any further, let's just talk about what this compare method is actually doing. Okay, and I'll break it down into three things that it could do. So compare will return either a negative number, 0, or a positive number. All right, so let's just work with the negative number, positive number, and then 0. Okay. Now, if it outputs a negative number, right, a negative int, that's basically saying that log1, our input log1, is less than our input log2. Okay? And since it's log1 is less than log2, that means it'll output in the order where log1 will come before log2. Okay? Now, if our compare method outputs a positive number, it doesn't matter what that number is, but let's just say it outputs a positive int, that means our log1, we're saying that our log1 is greater than our log2, and hence the order that it outputs will be such that log1 will come right after log2. Okay? Now, if we output a 0, we're saying that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if log1 is less than or greater than log2. That means log1 is basically equal to log2, and we don't care the order that it's output. Let's just output the order in the way that it was inputted. So it'll come out as log1, log2 in this case. Okay. So using this idea and understanding that our real inputs could be 4 things. All right, just like we had in our examples earlier, our input could be a letter log, digit log, or a digit log, or a digit log, letter log, or 2 digit logs, or 2 letter logs. Okay, so let me just copy this here, or 2 letter logs. Now, if we are given the inputs letter log and digit log in this order, how would we want to output it? Well, according to our instructions, we want our letter logs to come before any digit log. So what would we have to output in order to make sure that our letter log will come before our digit log? Well, if we look at this first example, or the first output that we have, above, we see that when we output a negative number, log 1, this input log 1 will come directly before log 2, which is exactly what we want here. We want our letter log to come before our digit log. So we're going to return a negative number. Let's just say -1. We'll just return -1, okay? Now, if our digit log, if we are given inputs digit log, letter log, we want our letter log to come before our digit log, right? So what output should we do in order to make sure that this letter log comes before this digit log? Well, notice here, if we output a positive number and we're given inputs log 1, log 2, the only way for this log 2 to come before log 1 is by outputting a positive number. Or in other words, if we return positive 1, this is the only way where we'll get our order to be letter log, digit log. That's the only way we can output that order. Okay, cool. If we have 2 digit logs, we're told that, my bad for this earlier spelling mistake, we're told that if we're given 2 digit logs, the digit log should be put in their original order. So since we don't care about the order that it was inputted, we just return 0. Okay? And finally, if we are given 2 letter logs to compare, we have one extra step we need to take. The letter logs are ordered lexicographically, ignoring the identifier. So the log ignoring the identifier needs to be ordered alphabetically. And if they're the same, we need to use the identifier to catch if there's a tie. So basically, since these are both strings, if the letter log, the first letter log, well, and I'll just make that distinction here, letter log 1, letter log 2, if letter log 1 equals letter log 2, then we need to get the ID. Now, since they're all strings, we can call strings compare to method, which does exactly what we've been doing so far, except like in this case we're like comparing we're comparing like a letter and a number type. But if we're just comparing strings, we can call strings compare to method and say ID of log 1 dot compare to ID of log 2, which we'll get the ID of log 1, ID of log 2 later. Else, if letter log 1 doesn't equal letter log 2, then we'll just, since they're both strings once again, we'll just do letter log 1 dot compare to letter log 2. Okay, so that's how we're going to order it. This will return, this will also return an int, this will also return an int. So using this in mind, we'll go ahead and create our compare implementation, okay? Okay, so what actually is a log? And how are we going to dissect each of the strings, each of our logs, to actually get the information we want and to actually compare them with each other? Well, we see in our first example, let's just take this right here. A log is in the form of an ID and these other words after that. We need a way to, I think it's important to grab the ID and hold that somewhere and to hold the rest of the string in another variable maybe. And the reason why I think it's important is because let's say log 1 equals this and log 2 equals, and we'll call it AE1, I think is what I called it in the example earlier, or it's can. Well, using, in our instructions, we see that the letter logs are ordered lexicographically, ignoring the identifier. So, as in, it's saying that this entire part of the string is compared with this entire part of the string. We want to see if these two are the same. So how can we actually grab these, how can we divide each log so that we have the identifier and we have the rest of the string? Well, the split method has, the split method can actually be used to, grab the first word and everything else, and we can store it into an array. So you'll see what I mean. String array, log 1 array equals, equals log 1 dot split, and we're going to split on the delimiter of the space, since we see that there's going to be a bunch of spaces in between, And if we just add in this extra parameter 2 into the split method, this is going to split our string into an array where we're only going to have 2 elements. One is going to be the first element in our string, and the second element is going to be everything else that's in our log. Okay, so it's going to look like that, and we'll do the same thing with log2. We'll just call it log2 array, log2 split, and this will be something like this will hold AE1 as like the 0th index, and then the entire rest of these string in the next index. Okay, so now I think it's important to get the identifier of each of these. So I'll say ID log1. Oops, and that's a string. ID log1 is going to be log1 array. And since we know that it's going to be in the 0th index, we'll just get the 0th index of this. And we'll do the same thing for log2. And we'll say log2 array, and we'll get the 0th index of that. And we also, I think, should get the entire, like everything else, the entire rest of the word. Okay, and we'll just call that string log without ID is going to be log1 array, and we'll get the first index of that. And sorry, we'll say log1 without ID, log2 without ID, so log2 array, first index. Okay, so now we have all our pieces. So we need to figure out a way to figure out if this is actually a digit or a letter log, right? A digit log or a letter log. Now, let me show you. If we were given log2, we'll just say log2 will be this. Now, if we were given this, we were told that the IDs don't really matter. The second word in each log will determine if we have a letter log or a digit log. Now, just looking at this like from our eyes, we see that this is a string and this is a digit. Okay, so how can we? Is there a method that we can use to to tell us if this is a string or not a digit rather, and this is a digit? Well, the character class has 2 methods. Character has 2 methods called isDigit, which will tell us if our character is a digit, and it also has character.isAlphabetic, which will tell us if it's not a digit. It's an alphabet. It's a letter log in our case, right? So we can utilize these 2 methods to tell it, and we can just call it on like this index. Now, obviously, we're given we've separated everything in strings so far, but if we grab the first index of our log1 array, which is this, remember our first index is this entire string. All we really need here, let me put these values here. All we really need is the first character of the log1 without ID, because that'll be, in this case, it'll just be A, and in this case, it will just be 8. So that alone will tell us if we have a digit or an alphabet, and it'll just single out that one character. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're just going to compare the first character of each of these strings. Okay, and we've gotten the strings right here. So that's all we're going to do. And now we can go ahead and compare those. So if character dot isDigit, and we're going to check if, let's just say log1 without ID. So if log1 ID, if log1 is digit, which means it's a digit log, and character, I'll just copy this, character.isDigit log2 without ID, which means both of these are digits, log2 without ID. Well, what does that mean? Well, earlier we were saying that if we were comparing 2 digit logs, we're just going to return 0. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Return 0. Now, else if I'm just going to copy this entire condition and put it here. Now, if the first log is not a digit, all right. So in other words, we are given let1 art can, and then the second one will be dig1 8151, for example. if we were given it, if our inputs were given to us in this order, where the letter log, where the first one is not a digit, hence it's a letter log, we know from our earlier example, this earlier write-up up here, it's kind of similar to this, where our letter log is going to come before our digit log. So we're going to return -1 here. Return -1. Now I'm just going to copy this and do the same thing here, but this time, you know what I'm going to do different? I'm just going to say the first log is going to be a digit, and the second one is not going to be a digit. Or in other words, it's going to be like this. Right? Now, if this was given to us as input, how would we order this? Well, look at our earlier example up here. If we were given a digit log and a letter log in this order, we'd want to return a +1 in order to get the correct order of like the letter log coming before the digit log. So we're going to return +1. And finally, I'm just going to do else. Else, what does that mean? That means we have two letter logs. We have two letter logs. And if that's the case, let's first check to see if they are the same, all right? If our letter logs without the ID are the same. Okay, so if log without ID dot equals log2 without ID, that means we have a tie, right? And what does it say in the instructions if we have a tie? With the identifier used in case of tie. So we're going to compare the IDs, okay? And we'll just do return ID log1 dot compare to ID log2. Otherwise, now if this case isn't passed, then and all these cases haven't triggered, all we're going to do is return our logs in alphabetical order. So let's just return log1 without ID dot compare to log2 without ID. And this should handle all of our cases of comparing two logs. Now all we're going to do here to finally finish this off is call our arrays.sort method on the logs, and we're going to use our custom comparator to actually compare our elements while sorting. And since this happens in place in our logs array, we assume that logs is completely sorted after this line. We can return logs, and that's all we have to do here. So let's see if this worked. Hopefully all that code did not trigger an error. Oh, what happened? Oh, right. So I need to, when you're making a custom comparator, you need to end it with a semicolon. Forgot to do that. All right. Oh man, after all that, I was saying we should get like the first character. So we're going to do car at 0, car at 0, and I did that so many times. So I'm just gonna copy this. All right, so now let's see. Okay, so that worked on this case. Hopefully that passed all the case. So let's just go ahead and submit. And perfect, it runs faster than 71%, less than 17% for memory. All right, so this will work for us, guys. I'm really sorry about that little mistake. I even said like we just need to get the character, completely forgot to do that, so sorry about that. So the runtime for this thing will be ologn because we're using arrays.sort. And yeah, guys, so that's it. So yeah, that is how you do this problem. If this was in any way helpful for you, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. If you want me to make another video going in depth on the compare to and compare methods, I can make it its own video. Just let me know in the comments below. And also just let me know how many times I said compare in this video. If I had to guess, I think I said it like 60 times. But yeah, if you want me to make a solution on any other Leetcode problems, just let me know and I'll be sure to do them. But yeah, if that otherwise, you guys have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you guys next time.